At 9:30 in the morning on August 20th, 1944, inside a quiet headquarters near Argentan, France, General Omar Bradley stared at a situation map that suddenly made no sense. The coloured pins on the board showed friendly forces where they should not be. One spearhead was marked far beyond the planned front line, deep in territory still believed to be controlled by the German army. For a moment, Bradley thought it was a mistake. Then he realized the impossible truth. George S. Patton had done it again. He had pushed his army nearly 200 miles forward, faster than any staff plan allowed, and now he was behind enemy lines. Bradley's reaction was not calm, not amused, and not entirely angry either. It was the reaction of a commander who knew history was moving faster than anyone could control. The moment deserves attention because it captures the strange mix of brilliance and danger that defined the Allied advance across France in the summer of 1944. The war in Western Europe had changed completely in just 10 weeks. On June 6th, Allied soldiers fought their way ashore in Normandy. By early July, the fighting was slow, costly, and uncertain. Thick hedgerows boxed in every movement. German defences were stubborn. Casualties were high. Many senior officers feared the campaign could stall for months. Then, in late July, everything broke open. And when it did, no one moved faster or further than Patton. To understand what Bradley thought and why it mattered, it is important to understand the men involved. Omar Nelson Bradley was born in Missouri in 1893. He was calm, quiet, and careful. Soldiers called him the soldier's general. He believed in planning, coordination, and steady pressure. He rarely raised his voice. He avoided the spotlight. By 1944, he commanded the U.S. First Army and later the 12th Army Group, the largest American force ever assembled. His job was not to chase glory. His job was to win the war without wasting lives. George Smith Patton, Jr. was almost the opposite in style. Born in California in 1885, Patton believed war was movement, speed, and shock. He wore polished helmets, spoke in sharp phrases, and demanded constant advance. He believed hesitation killed more soldiers than bold action. By August 1944, he commanded the U.S. Third Army. He had been held back during the Normandy landings, waiting for the right moment. When that moment came, he exploded forward with a force that stunned both enemies and allies. The stage for this moment was set in late July 1944 during Operation Cobra. On July 25th, near Saint-Lô, American bombers smashed a narrow section of German lines. The ground shook. German units were shattered. On July 26th and 27, U.S. infantry and armour poured through the gap. By August 1st, Patton's Third Army became operational. The breakout had begun. Bradley understood the opportunity. He wanted to break out into open country, turn the German flank, and destroy their forces west of the Seine River. The plan was bold, but still controlled. Patton, however, saw something more. He saw empty roads, retreating enemy units, and a chance to end the war in France in weeks instead of months. On August 3, 1944, Patton's forces took Avranches, the gateway from Normandy into Brittany and central France. This was the key moment. Once Avranches fell, the hedgerow country ended. Open terrain began. Roads widened. German defences thinned. Patton wasted no time. His armoured division surged south and east at a pace that stunned everyone watching the maps back at headquarters. Bradley initially encouraged the advance. Speed was essential. German forces were reeling. On August 4th and 5, Patton sent units toward Rennes, Angers, and Nantes. At the same time, he pivoted east toward Le Mans, a critical road hub. On August 8th, Le Mans fell. German 7th Army headquarters barely escaped capture. Patton had already driven more than 100 miles in a week. This was where concern began to grow. Supplies had to travel from the beaches of Normandy along damaged roads. Fuel was limited. Ammunition stocks were stretched. Bradley and Eisenhower worried that Patton was moving faster than logistics could support. They also worried about exposed flanks. German forces, though battered, were not destroyed. A sudden counterattack could cut Patton off. Those fears were not theoretical. On August 7th, Adolf Hitler ordered a counter-offensive near Mortain. German armoured units attacked westward, aiming to cut the Allied corridor at Avranches. The attack failed, largely due to Allied air power and stubborn ground defence. But it confirmed Allied fears. The Germans were still capable of sudden blows. Despite this, Patton did not slow down. He believed the German army was collapsing. He believed the moment demanded risk. On August 10th and 11th, his units raced east toward Alençon and Argentan. This movement helped form the southern jaw of what became known as the Falaise pocket. German forces were being trapped. Bradley faced a difficult decision. British and Canadian forces were pushing south from Caen. Patton was pushing north. If the jaws closed fully, much of the German army in Normandy could be destroyed. But if Patton went too far, he risked overextension and friendly fire confusion. On August 13th, Bradley ordered Patton to halt near Argentan. This decision would be debated for decades. Patton was furious, but obeyed. Still, even with the halt, his forward elements had already gone far beyond what many staff officers believed possible. By August 15th, German forces were in full retreat. The Falaise pocket was partially closed. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. The road east was open. This is where the famous moment began to form. After Falaise, Bradley expected a period of consolidation. Units would realign, supplies would catch up, command lines would be clarified. Instead, Patton pressed forward again. On August 16th and 17th, Third Army units crossed the Sarthe River. On August 18th, they reached Chartres. On August 19th, they crossed the Loire River. German resistance was scattered and disorganized. By August 20th, Patton's lead elements were nearly 200 miles from the original Normandy beaches. In some areas, they were moving faster than radio reports could track. Units advanced so quickly that maps were outdated within hours. German rear area units were being overrun before they even knew Americans were nearby. Bradley's headquarters struggled to keep up. Staff officers worked through the night updating situation maps. Reports came in late or incomplete. Some units reported being in towns that higher command still believed were enemy-held. This created confusion and risk. Friendly units could collide. Supply columns could drive into ambushes. Air support could strike the wrong targets. It was during this chaos that Bradley made his now famous reaction. He did not shout. He did not panic, but he expressed deep concern mixed with grudging admiration. In his later writings, Bradley explained that Patton had advanced faster than any army commander he had ever seen. He also made clear that such speed made his job far more difficult. Bradley understood the strategic picture. He knew that the Germans were retreating toward the Seine River. He knew that Paris was close to liberation. He knew that momentum mattered, but he also knew that wars are not won by speed alone. They are won by coordination, supply, and control. Patton's forces were now operating in areas where German command structure had collapsed, but individual units still fought fiercely. Bridges were destroyed. Fuel dumps were empty. Roads were clogged with refugees and retreating enemy troops. Third Army relied heavily on captured fuel and rapid improvisation. This was daring, but dangerous. On August 21st, Patton's units reached the outskirts of the Seine. Some crossed near Montet-Gassicourt. Others probed for crossings farther, south. German forces attempted to establish defensive lines but lacked cohesion. Allied air power destroyed bridges and columns. The retreat turned into a rout. Bradley's concern increased. His fear was not that Patton would fail to advance. His fear was that Patton would advance so far that he would outrun support and be forced to halt at a critical moment. This could allow the Germans to regroup. it could also create political complications, especially with French territory being liberated so rapidly. Despite these concerns, Bradley recognised that Patton's movement had achieved something extraordinary. German forces west of the Seine were shattered. The liberation of Paris became inevitable. On August 25th, French and American forces entered the city. The campaign in Normandy was effectively over. Looking back, Bradley described his reaction as a mix of pride and anxiety. He knew Patton's drive had shortened the war in France. He also knew that a single mistake could have turned triumph into disaster. The fact that it did not was due to a combination of German weakness, Allied air superiority, and Patton's instinct for timing. It is important to note that Patton was not acting entirely alone. His corps commanders, men like Major General Troy Middleton and Major General Walton Walker, executed orders with skill. Logistics officers performed miracles to keep fuel moving forward. Engineers repaired bridges under fire. Signal units kept communications alive across vast distances. The Red Ball Express, established on August 25th, became the lifeline for Patton and other advancing armies. Thousands of trucks ran day and night, carrying fuel, ammunition, and food from Normandy to the front. Without this effort, Patton's advance would have stalled quickly. Bradley's role was to balance this momentum with overall strategy. As commander of the 12th Army Group, he had to coordinate multiple armies across a broad front. British forces under Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery were advancing in the north. American forces were advancing in the centre and south. Resources had to be shared. Priorities had to be set. This tension came to a head in early September when fuel shortages forced Patton to halt near the Moselle River. The pause frustrated him deeply. He believed he could reach the Rhine if given fuel. Bradley and Eisenhower believed the risk was too great. They chose a broad front advance instead of a single, deep thrust. The moment when Patton appeared 200 miles ahead of expectations became symbolic. It represented the potential and the danger of bold command. Bradley never denied Patton's effectiveness. He simply believed that war required discipline as well as courage. In later years, Bradley wrote that Patton's advance after Normandy was one of the most dramatic maneuvers in American military history. He also noted that it succeeded partly because the enemy was already defeated in spirit. German units lacked reserves, fuel, and clear orders. Their command system was breaking down. This does not diminish Patton's achievement. It places it in context. Speed alone does not win wars, but speed at the right moment can shatter an enemy beyond recovery. Patton sensed that moment. Bradley managed its consequences. The interaction between these two generals shaped the final phase of the war in Western Europe. Their different styles created tension, but also balance. Patton pushed. Bradley restrained. Together, under Eisenhower's leadership, they delivered victory. The image of Bradley standing over a map, realizing Patton was far ahead of schedule, captures the essence of command in war. Plans meet reality. Personalities clash. Decisions must be made with incomplete information. Success often comes from controlled chaos. By September 1944, Allied forces stood at the borders of Germany. France was largely liberated. The war was not over, but its direction was clear. The rapid advance across France had saved countless lives by shortening the campaign. When historians examine this period, they often debate whether Patton should have been allowed to go even farther. They also debate whether Bradley's caution prevented disaster. These debates continue because both men were right in different ways. Bradley's reaction was not a simple statement. It was an understanding that history was unfolding faster than doctrine allowed. It was an acknowledgement that extraordinary commanders sometimes break the rules. It was also a reminder that even brilliance must answer to strategy. The summer of 1944 remains one of the most studied campaigns in military history. It offers lessons in leadership, logistics, and risk. It shows how personalities shape events. It shows how moments of surprise can change the course of a war. When Patton appeared far behind enemy lines, it was not an accident. It was the result of preparation, opportunity, and relentless drive. Bradley saw this clearly. His concern did not diminish his respect. In the end, what Bradley expressed was not anger or disbelief. It was the sober realization that Patton had turned possibility into reality faster than anyone expected. And for a brief, dangerous, historic moment, the war moved at Patton's speed. That moment, frozen on a map in August 1944, reminds us that victory often comes not from perfect plans, but from the courage to act when the enemy is weakest. It also reminds us that someone must always be there to count the cost, measure the risk, and keep the larger picture in view. That was Bradley's role, and together those two roles helped bring the war in Europe closer to its end. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.